What is the first movie that comes to your mind when you hear the name Elizabeth Shue? Do you think of her as the Karate Kid's love interest, or the babysitter who went on an adventure through downtown Chicago, or the Oscar-nominated prostitute from Leaving Las Vegas? Well, chances are the movie that comes to mind is not Link, a horror movie where Shue shares the screen with a homicidal orangutan that's being passed off as a chimp. Link is not very well known, but it should be. And if you haven't seen it, it is the best horror movie you never saw. Link was directed by Alfred Hitchcock devotee Richard Franklin, an Australian filmmaker who for a while looked like he could be one of the best sources for new Hitchcockian thrillers once the master of suspense himself had passed away. Franklin had even been friends with Hitchcock, having met him while attending film school in California. He got his directing career started in the 70s, making the Western sex comedy The True Story of Eskimo Nell and the softcore sex study Phantasm, not to be confused with the Don Coscarelli horror classic. He then shifted gears and started following in the footsteps of his hero. He teamed up with screenwriter Everett de Roche to make the 1978 sci-fi horror cult classic Patrick. The following year, he optioned a short outline, presumably written by Tom Ackerman and future MacGyver creator Lee David Zlotoff, for a horror film. The film would have been like Jaws, but with chimps. The story wasn't entirely there though, so Franklin set it aside and focused on making the 1981 thriller Road Games, starring Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis, a project that came about when de Roche suggested making a version of Hitchcock's Rear Window that would take place inside of a moving vehicle. It was de Roche who cracked the story of Link, not surprising since he already had killer animal movie experience. Having written the 1978 Nature Run Amok film Long Weekend, he read a National Geographic article by chimp expert Jane Goodall that shook up everything people had believed about chimps. As Franklin explained to Fangoria magazine, Goodall saw, quote, "the cannibalizing of young chimpanzees by one particular mad female chimp. She observed an actual intertribal warfare between two groups of chimps. The whole 60s idea of a man being the only animal to make war against his own kind was suddenly thrown out the window. That, to me, was a really interesting idea for a good thriller." End quote. The script that de Roche wrote follows American zoology student Jane Chase, who attends the London College of Sciences. She gets a job working as assistant to anthropology professor Dr. Stephen Phillip, not at the college, but at this isolated home on the English coast. A house that sits on the edge of a cliff in farmland that's patrolled by dangerous wild dogs. Phillip has to do his work at home because the university won't let 2 of his 3 chimps anywhere near the campus. 6-year-old Imp is okay. He seems to be gentle and harmless, despite his habit of killing birds and cats. But the mature female Voodoo is wild. And 45-year-old Link, who likes to wear clothes and smoke cigars because he used to be called the Master of Fire in a circus, well, there just seems to be something off about Link. Things fall apart soon after Jane arrives at Phillip's house. The doctor makes a call about selling Voodoo because she can't breed anymore, and having Link put down because the old boy is getting increasingly more strange. Link doesn't care about Voodoo, but he murders Phillip to protect himself. He dumps the body in a well and pushes the doctor's car off of a cliff. It takes a while for Jane to realize that the doctor is dead, but it doesn't take long for her to realize that Link is weird. He even likes to creep on her when she's trying to take a bath, and soon enough, she finds out he's dangerous, a killer. She needs to find a way out of this situation, which is complicated since Link has destroyed the phones and all the vehicles, and she can't walk to town because of the wild dogs roaming the countryside. Franklin was going to start filming Link in Australia in 1981. The funding was in place, but then a major distraction. He was offered the chance to direct a sequel to the Hitchcock masterpiece, Psycho. It was an opportunity that he simply could not turn down, and Psycho 2 turned out to be a better movie than anybody could have expected it to be. In fact, it was so well received, it led to Franklin and writer Tom Holland re-teaming on the spy adventure Cloak and Dagger. That one wasn't a box office success, so Franklin circled back to Link, which he hoped people would not compare to The Birds, so it wouldn't look like he was just copying Hitchcock with every single movie. He wanted his killer animal movie to be more rooted in reality than the fantasy loyalty of the birds. But the two films do share a crew member, Ray Berwick, who trained the birds for Hitchcock's movie and trained the apes for Link. The film was set up at Thorn EMI Screen Entertainment, which was, during that period, headed by Verdi Lambert, known for being the founding producer of the Doctor Who series. Production took place in Scotland, although the story is set in England, and that setting was very important to Franklin. He quoted, "In mood, tone, and look, it resembles Psycho 2 crossed with the English setting of Jane Eyre. The English setting to me was essential. I wanted to contrast the primitivism of jungle animals with old world values, high culture, and civilization." End quote. Elizabeth Shue, fresh off of The Karate Kid and the short-lived TV show Call to Glory, was cast as Jane Chase, her first lead role in a feature film. Terrence Stamp plays the ill-fated Dr. Phillip. Kevin Lloyd shows up as a chimp dealer, Bailey, with Stephen Finch credited as Stephen Pinner playing Jane's boyfriend, David, and Richard Garnett and David O'Hara as his friends Tom and Dennis, who are just there to boost the body count really. But aside from Shue and Stamp, most of the human actors have very, very brief roles in the film. And there's still an hour left in the running time when Stamp makes his exit. So the majority of the film is carried by Shue and some apes. Imp is played by Jed, with Carrie as Voodoo, and then there's Link, who's referred to as a chimp even though he's clearly an orangutan. This ape actor was named Locke. His fur was dyed a darker color and he was given prosthetic ears so he would look more like a chimpanzee. It didn't do any good, but it was better than the alternative. Throughout pre-production, Franklin was pressured to have the chimps played by people in costumes and makeup. He refused because he was not making a fantasy film. This meant that it needed to be rooted in the reality of what chimps were actually capable of. So he got to make the movie with real monkeys. Shue would go on to earn an Academy Award nomination for Leaving Las Vegas, but watching this movie will make you think that the Oscars should have a category for Best Ape Acting, because Locke turns in an incredible performance as Link. Of course, this is mainly the work of Franklin and his editors. Locke didn't know what kind of story his trainer had him acting out after all, but he was able to give the filmmakers the movements and expressions that built his screen performance to perfection. And when the camera cuts to Link, you can see the wheels spinning in his mind. He's plotting, scheming, or perving based on the bathroom scene. There's an old saying that you shouldn't work with animals, but Franklin didn't have much trouble working with the apes on Link. Production even went more smoothly than he was anticipating. The real problems didn't even arise until post-production. That's when Franklin was informed that Cannon Films, the US distributor, would be cutting 8 minutes out of his movie. It got worse when Thorn EMI Screen Entertainment went up for sale and was purchased by Cannon. So now they owned Link, and they decided to cut 5 more minutes. The film was now 13 minutes shorter than the director had intended, which may not have even been the worst thing. Even at the final running time of 103 minutes, Link feels slightly longer than necessary. Cannon really could have gotten a bit more out of it, but as far as Franklin was concerned, his film had now been compromised. Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our Joe Blow channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some. Before its Halloween 1986 release, Franklin was considering making another ape thriller about an anthropologist getting caught in the middle of war between chimpanzee tribes in Africa, but it just wasn't to be. Link was not as well received by critics as Road Games, Psycho 2, and Cloak and Dagger had been, and the box office numbers weren't great either. Made on a budget of $6 million, Link earned less than $2 million in US ticket sales. It made the video and cable rounds and got a bit of a cult following, and in 2021, an extended cut that boosted the running time to 125 minutes was released in France. But Link never came to become as popular as it deserved to be. Even those who were involved with the film have since written it off. Franklin dismissed it as an unsatisfying experience on almost every level. Shue said her career wasn't going well when she did a, quote, not great horror movie called Link. But we have to disagree with Elizabeth Shue here. Link is a great horror movie. The setup is perfectly simple. A young woman trapped in an isolated house with a dangerous ape. Dialogue in the early scenes lets us know how much trouble this could be for her, as we hear that chimps are 8 times stronger than humans, and we're told a story about a man being torn to pieces by a chimp who was just happy to see him. Franklin does a great job of building the suspense as Jane gradually figures out what's going on. and Shu did a great job of carrying the film for a long stretch when she's alone with these apes. She was only 21 years old during this production, just starting out in her career, and she proved she was capable of being a strong lead. Hopefully, she's proud of her work in this movie, even if she's not a fan of it. There are plenty of other killer primate movies out there, and this ranks up there as one of the best ones. Along with the 1932 Murders in the Rue Morgue and George A. Romero's Monkey Shines, it's unique in its approach to the concept, as it builds up Link in the same way that it might build up a character that was human. He's lurking around like a silent, voyeuristic creeper. We know it's only a matter of time before something terrible is going to happen. We're waiting for the moment when he's going to fully snap. And once Jane comes to understand what Link is capable of, it kicks off a sequence that's around 30 minutes of almost non-stop action and thrills. That is, of course, the most entertaining section of the movie. And judging by the way it was shot, it feels like Franklin was having a lot of fun bringing it to the screen. When Jane attempts to shoot Link through a door, there's a cool shot of her through the hole that was left in the door. There's a cave in the cellar that leads down to the sea. And when Jane and Imp make it down to the water, you might think they may have just escaped from Link, but Franklin lets us know that the action is far from over by cutting to a helicopter shot and the song Ape Man by the Kinks kicking on the soundtrack. Then we fly over the road that leads to the house and see Jane's boyfriend and a couple of friends are about to arrive to meet Link themselves. Then we get to watch the body count increase as Link deals with his new arrivals, and Franklin was particularly pleased with a moment where he had Link pull someone through a mail slot in the front door. Jane's boyfriend David is injured by Link. She has to help him by putting a makeshift splint on his leg, adding a humorous element to the final chase sequence as we watch this injured guy with a leg splint try to escape from Link, getting tossed all over the place and probably injuring himself even more. The only questionable shot in here comes when Link chases Jane and David upstairs and they try to hide in Philip's lab, which has a metal door. To follow Jane and David into the lab, Franklin has the camera going over the top of the wall, breaking the reality and revealing that this is just a set piece. This is something that's done in movies all the time, but some people might find it a bit jarring. But a movie is doing pretty well when you're only left questioning one single shot in the film. And whether or not a couple extra minutes could have been taken out, overall, Link is an intriguing, well-crafted thriller with good human and primate performances, and a score by Jerry Goldsmith that is occasionally reminiscent of the work he did on Gremlins. The film proves once again that Richard Franklin was indeed a master of suspense. Unfortunately, it was the last movie he made in the 80s, and in the 90s, he decided to change directions. Rather than continue making genre movies, he moved on to the art house. He would eventually reteam with Everett DeRoche on the 2003 horror film Visitors, his last film before he passed away in 2007. But that run he had from Patrick through Link really makes us wish that we had gotten a lot more Franklin thrillers to watch. So, if you haven't met Link yet, head out to the isolated home of the English coast and spend some time with him. He'll do some tricks for you like smoking cigars, setting fires, and even murdering people. He puts on a great show, and it's definitely worth checking out. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our Joe Blow Horror Originals channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and ring the bell to receive notifications for our latest videos. We are an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.